Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. I hope you're all doing well this morning. Once again, I thought I'd dive into the wonderful world of modern education and a phrase that I have seen floating around, and I don't know if I've ever addressed it directly on any of my videos. Racial literacy. I was thinking about this morning before I set up the stream and got everything ready. And if you recall my guide for making up your own TEDx title or TEDx presentation, where you think of a positive notion like tranquility or positivity or peace or something, and then want to put some kind of word at the front there to define it, whether it's toxic or radical, and how you can sort of like change the entire meaning of something with just that prefix. It's difficult for me to think of how many times I've seen something turned into absolute insidiousness by putting the word racial in front of it. I mean, really, think of any sort of positive notion: competency, literacy, hygiene. You put the word racial in front of it, it already takes on a very menacing tone, because you're effectively saying, before you've said anything else, that here we will now begin to talk about how stereotypes are fact based on race. So what does racial literacy have to do in creating strong foundational skills that are essential to an equitable education? I have absolutely no idea, but I have a panel of educators, at least that's what I'm assuming they are, who are about to tell us, apparently. So I thought we'd look at that today. It runs just over 15 minutes, so it's effectively like your good old TEDx presentation. We'll get to that momentarily, but first, who is joining me this morning for this adventure into speculative education? Spud Gun, hello, Matt Barnes, A Scanner Daftly, Swirl Blue, Brigid, Keeverdam, MJ Garrick, Mike R., Mike Savage, Blarg, Evil One, Atheist Icon. Who else? Anyone else? I guess that's the morning crew. Hello, Dawn Patrol. Welcome to the show. Yeah, not much else to add to that before we begin. Per usual, I will start out with a couple of seconds for a sound test. Oh, I'm sorry, it comes in at just under 16 minutes. We're just about at the lean of that. Let's see, this comes from Pivot Learning, whatever that is, and Consortium on Reaching Excellence in Education, which doesn't sound at all creepy. Great teaching makes all the difference. I certainly believe that to be true. All right, couple seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and if you can't hear the distant call of the police sirens, as I'm always accompanied whenever I do my streams lately. Let's go.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Have they joined us today? You guys tell me. Anyone else show up since a second ago? Zero the Hero, No Name, Dexter. Good morning. Arc 210. Oh, here they come, singing the song of their people. Whee! Yes, the benefits and the curse of living near a highway patrol office. All right, a conversation with Zaretta Hammond, why racial literacy. And could you guys stop it, please? No, I know you're out there. Okay, are we done? I guess we're done. Why racial literacy and strong foundational skills are essential to equitable education. Equitable education. This is another notion that I just find so interesting, because equity in the modern parlance means equality of outcome. No one ends up going through school with the exact same outcome as someone else. It's not possible. You can give everybody the same opportunities, but you're never going to end up with the exact same result. So we have racial literacy, which means I assume, racial stereotypes are exact and predictable, with an eye towards ending up with a predictable outcome. Can't wait.
We are in conversation with Zaretta Hammond. We are so excited about our conversation today, which is going to touch on culturally responsive teaching and learning recovery. So,
culturally responsive teaching. That reminds me of cultural competency, one of those other interesting phrases that have popped up recently, and I did a video on not too long ago. What is cultural competency? I have a feeling it's basically synonymous with the idea of racial literacy, but let's find out.
So welcome, Zaretta. I'm joined today with my colleagues, Joyce Highhouse and Nicodemus Ford. We are so honored to have Zaretta Hammond with us today.
Just because she may or may not read all of this, but I'm going to do so for those of you listening at home. Zaretta Hammond is the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, and an equity freedom fighter who trains new leaders and pre-service teachers on how equity, neuroscience, and culture should inform our instructional practices. Zaretta has a bachelor's degree in English literature and writing from New York University. Well, I've got one of those, not from New York University, but that's effectively what my major was. And her master's degree in secondary English education with a concentration in writing instruction from University of Colorado, Boulder. Zaretta started her career as a writing teacher, and her work focuses heavily on connecting literacy, instruction, and equity. Literacy, instruction, and equity. I'm not quite sure if literacy in this context is the same as racial literacy. I suppose we'll find out. She has taught courses in adolescent literacy at St. Mary's College of California, where she focused on reading support strategies for students of color. She is a trained group facilitator in anti-bias processes and conversations about racial politics and privilege. Lovely.
Thank you for having me.
Our teaching force, just shifting gears a little bit here, talking more about the adults and our makeup and what we bring to the spaces, Zaretta, and just thinking about our teaching force, right? And we know the dynamics, certainly nationally, but particularly here in California, we know the dynamics in terms of background and makeup. Our teaching force here in California is predominantly white.
Real quick, again, in case they don't read it out, there's a card on the screen. Our teaching force is overwhelmingly white, while our student populations, particularly here in California, are predominantly black and brown. Teaching force. That's a phrase I don't think I've heard before. It's an interesting way of categorizing teachers. Also, obviously, focusing very much on skin color. And then underneath that, a question. I hadn't expected this today. What role do affinity groups and/or spaces play as it pertains to the critical work of culturally responsive teaching and learning? Affinity groups and affinity spaces. Some of you may be aware of the story that came out of Atlanta recently, where a mother sued a school district for allowing a teacher or a principal of a school, to racially segregate classrooms. And I've seen a lot of people who have come across this story who are shocked by this notion that this could be happening in schools these days. And I've been a little bit self-promoting in attaching links to some of my videos that I've done over the last couple of years in regards to racial affinity groups and classroom segregation in the modern day. Yeah, so if you thought it was only Atlanta, by anyone who might be listening in for the first time, it isn't, and it hasn't been.
And as we, think about our students in the classroom, we have particularly overwhelmingly black and brown students in our classrooms. So just thinking about, how we have these conversations as educators, and just thinking more specifically around the role of affinity groups. So just curious, what has your work revealed to you, your experiences about the role of affinity groups and/or those spaces as it pertains to the critical work of culturally responsive teaching and learning?
Yes, I am very, very honestly, morbidly curious to know how educators believe segregating students on the basis of race is a benefit to education. I am dying to know the answer to that question.
Well, I think that's a multifaceted question.
I love those little things where it's like, I need to say something to give myself a moment to think about what my answer is going to be, because I don't actually have an answer right off the top of my head.
And the answer is, again, I think integrating various pieces, because affinity groups, just to have affinity groups where people break out along racial lines, white affinity groups, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and whatever other distinctions folks make. Because, those groups are not, monoliths, and depending on what part of the country you're in, they're going to break down differently.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter, does it? They are monoliths. If you're going to split people down on the basis of skin color, you might as well be talking about monoliths. And by the way, they're not groups, they're demographics. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but apparently a lot. If you're going to admit that skin color does not denote a monolith, does not denote some kind of hive mind, then why would you make that the differential in the first place? Because you're effectively telling these kids that the one thing that values them above anything else is their skin color. And when you call them affinity groups, you're already saying without any uncertain terms that they are connected inherently and intrinsically by skin color first and foremost. You are creating monoliths in the minds of kids that you do this to. Or do you not understand that?
But I think the real question is, what do you do in the affinity group, right? Just getting white people together what are you being an affinity around?
That is a very good question. Please do tell me the utility of a affinity group.
What I typically have done is to ask people to think about, how are you building your racial literacy? And
God, phrases like that, I tell you, it just makes me. Racial literacy. It really sounds like something from the 1930s. It really does.
This is very different than examining their implicit bias, right? People talk about this as inside out work. So that inside work is really important, right? What are your own cultural reference points? What's your experience around, how you were taught and brought up in terms of race?
Well, how these kids are being brought up and taught in terms of race is that everyone needs to be divvied up on the basis of skin color first and foremost. That skin color informs you about something of the character of the person you're looking at, something of the worth of the person you are looking at. You are galvanizing and underscoring the worst notions of our society by doing this. You're not helping anything. You're not working to make race an irrelevancy in interpersonal connection and association. You're making it the defining trait.
Racism, and how are you understanding kind of white privilege and anti-racism? So those are all great conversations, but what I find is we really don't do educators a service when we don't help them build their racial literacy, understanding the outside, right? The social political context. Because
well, do tell me. I'm dying. That's why I'm here. Tell me what racial literacy means and how you employ it to achieve an equitable education. Just saying the phrase over and over again tells me nothing. So you need to tell me, what does it mean to be racially literate? What do you, as the expert, know about someone simply on the basis of looking at them? This is the checklist I would like to see. Otherwise, I have a very obviously blunt understanding of what the phrase racial literacy entails.
People continue to be surprised by the way in which inequity by design continues to rear its ugly head.
Inequity by design. Oh, you mean by splitting people up on the basis of race, particularly students? That's a design that creates inequity by assessing people on the basis of their skin color. And let alone performing racial segregation in schools. Have we heard of the Civil Rights Act? Have we heard of Title VI? Apparently not.
And as a result, it's like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. Well, it's happening right in your face.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of that shows up in non-racial ways, still creating a racialized outcome. So part of what has to happen in that is really getting people educated about what's going on. How is this manifesting in our system?
I'll tell you how it's manifesting in our system. Racial affinity groups, racial segregation in schools in the 21st century, and being branded as a positive. That's how.
For example, here in California, we can mask this a lot. We can be progressive in our mindset toward race and racial issues and still be participating unwittingly in creating racialized outcomes in school.
Okay, am I the only one that's finding just the absolute lack of self-awareness entertaining here? Complaining about structural endeavors that create inequitable outcomes on the basis of race with a PowerPoint card in front of us asking the question about what role do affinity groups and or spaces play as it pertains to the critical work of culturally responsive teaching and learning. You cannot decry something while you are practicing it and come across as credible. Keeperdam says volume dropped. The volume dropped? I don't have any control over that. Yeah, it's at the max as far as I can do it. And guys, with these panel discussions and these Zoom calls, the quality of the person's broadcast, I bumped up the audio as much as I could, but sometimes it's just, it's a roll of the dice as to what somebody's going to do. So if you can't hear me at all, then we've got a problem. If you can't hear a little bit or wavers a little bit, that's just, yeah, no, I've got it at the max volume, Keeperdam. Appreciate the heads up, but yeah, there's nothing I can do about it.
And just because it doesn't have some explicit connection to race or racism, we don't think that has any bearing on it. So if we do that at our own detriment, because what we're basically doing is putting blinders on and saying that we're ignorant of how inequity continues as a system to generate these outcomes. We can take reading, for example.
Is the sound really that bad? You guys can't hear the panel? Because if you can't hear the panel, I might as well just wrap this up, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose, and I can start over another time. Let me know real quick if it's really that difficult to make out what they're saying. Sorry, guys, live TV and everything else. I can hear them, so some English, I can hear it. Okay. I can hear this. Okay, just want to make sure. Just want to make sure. All right. Yeah, you might need to turn up your own native audio a little bit. I'll try not to yell too much into the microphone for you, but yeah, just one of those things.
So we know at a certain point, when you underdevelop reading capacity, say by second, certainly by third grade, you don't really have to do much else, because by the time the student gets in the fourth grade, they cannot take in the new content when most of the new content is through the student reading a book.
Whoa. Are we talking about literacy as in reading ability? Like reading skills as divvied up on the basis of race? Like, I hate to use the word, but are we literally talking about racial literacy? Is that what that means? Because if so, then I've been totally misled. Where? What? Okay, now I'm very confused. Two notions are in my head right now. Either we are talking about the differential in literacy rates between racial demographics, or we're talking about someone who understands the nature of someone's race because they understand the stereotypes or something. Okay, now this has become a complete mystery box to me.
So two things are going to happen. The student's going to fall behind. The student is going to have shallow background knowledge. So now they can't carry the cognitive load, because so none of this on its surface looks racialized. So if we don't understand that reading is the epicenter of equity, and that the anti-racist thing to do, because literacy was the mechanism to maintain white supremacy culture, then we should make sure that all children coming out of those early grades understand, how to decode with a level of automaticity, that they can read, that they have word knowledge, that
I completely agree. Literacy is, actual literacy, the ability to read and write and understand written language, is something that every child should be exposed to and taught, regardless of their skin color. Just everybody. So if that's what this is about, I'm going to have very little else to say. And yet we're talking about affinity groups in this deal. So what are we talking about?
all those things are building toward the student having that independence. If the student gets to 6th grade and is reading 2 grade levels behind, there's no path forward to cognitively independent learning. And we keep allowing this to happen, saying we want equity, but right there in your face, it's showing you you're not.
Okay, again, if she's just promoting literacy across the board for kids, great. Why are we talking about skin color as pertains to affinity groups, or assessing the teaching force versus the student population? I remain confused.
Doing things that are actually counter to this progressive idea that you're putting forward. And people think because they're saying they're anti-racist, because they want to embrace culturally responsive teaching, but they're doing nothing to ensure students are reading with grade proficiency.
I don't have anything to say to that, really. Okay, I am all for all kids being taught how to read and have reading comprehension skills, writing, so on and so forth. You got me. I'm on your side. What are we talking about again?
You can't have both. Those cancel each other out.
Uh-huh.
In your book, it's clear that...
Oh, Lord. Okay. You thought the audio was bad before. Okay. Sorry, guys. This is the Russian roulette of Zoom calls.
You're really passionate about building students' brain power and intellectual capacity to move from dependent to independent learners.
Wait. Okay. So I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I'm just trying to understand here. So just to back up, we're at 6:21. So previously, the text on the screen constitutes the question that the guest is being asked, but she didn't actually answer the question. I mean, she said something that I agree with, the importance of literacy in early grades and everything else. Great. What does that have to do with affinity groups or spaces as pertains to the critical work of culturally responsive teaching and learning? She didn't address that. She asked the question like, what does it mean to put all the white kids together? What are you going to get out of an affinity group? And then she, just, I don't know, lateraled over to a completely benign argument for literacy. Okay, so you're not going to answer the question. I guess that's the takeaway from that first segment. She's asked a question about affinity groups, and she talks about student literacy. And the people involved in this panel discussion accept that answer without question. Okay, and now we're on to a new question. Let's see if she answers this one. How do you think about foundational skills fitting into the goal of building independent learners? What? Okay.
Learners. In our work, we encounter arguments that building foundational skills is low-level, low-demand work that creates dependent learners.
Okay, so in case you didn't hear what she said, because obviously the audio was bad, the entire text of her speech there is on the screen, so I'll read it in its total. In your book, you write so passionately about building students' brain power and intellectual capacity to move from dependent to independent learners. In our work, we encounter arguments that building foundational skills is low-level, low-demand work that creates dependent learners. How do you think about foundational skills fitting into the goal of building independent learners? Maybe this is teacher speak, foundational skills like the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic. In our work, we encounter arguments that building foundational skills is low-level, low-demand work that creates dependent learners. If I'm understanding what foundational skills are, I don't think that inherently creates dependent learners. Of course, I guess I need a definition of what you mean by a dependent learner. They're always going to be looking to somebody to learn something they don't know for the most part, at least until they can learn it themselves through reading or other research. So maybe I'm just not built for this conversation.
How do you think about foundational skills and the goal of building independent learners?
So one of the hallmarks of educators who don't have a equity focused lens, but spout progressive, leanings, is the idea that foundational skills are low level. And
well, maybe I just don't understand the definition of foundational skills. Literally and figuratively, foundations are low level because they are foundational. They're like the beginning of what are we even talking about?
The research bears out that that is not accurate.
They're not low level? Are you guys going to define your terms at all? Or are you just expecting everybody to know exactly what you're talking about?
Because here's the thing about it. One of the paths forward to the high level work we want students to do is a strong foundation. So what is really important is for people to understand what strong foundational skills are.
Okay, I am glad we're going to get to a definition. What does strong foundational skills mean?
So yes, we want students to engage in critical thinking, but oral comprehension and thinking is not the same.
Oral comprehension and critical thinking is not the same. Well, you're correct. They're not, but they do, sort of dance together on the same floor.
As reading comprehension. So
you're right. Yes, oral comprehension, critical thinking, and reading comprehension, they're not the same thing. They are all three different things, but they are all necessary pieces to fit together. So what does that mean?
So those low level, what people would call, I'll put in air quotes, and finger quotes, low level skills are foundational.
Yes, no, I understand what foundational means. What? They're not all the same thing. You're making me very frustrated here.
It may not be the thing we need to spend a semester on, but they're the things that we ensure students master and put in place and we build upon. And it's interesting that we don't have the same conversation about what's a low-level skill with white students.
Excuse me? What? Say that again?
It's interesting that we don't have the same conversation about what's a low-level skill with white students.
I didn't hear anything so far about talking of low-level skills with any racial demographic at all. You did that.
Those same skills that they need, they get. And we make sure they master them, and then we build on more. And what we do simultaneously is to make sure those students have a level of automaticity. But when it comes to Black...
Automaticity. You really like that? That's the second time you've used that word. You really like that word.
More. And what we do simultaneously is to make sure those students have a level of automaticity. But when it comes to Black and brown children that are behind, we somehow want to skip over those. We want to MacGyver our way around it. That is the path down inequity.
If you say so. So teachers are ignoring Black and brown students when it comes to foundational skills. If they're behind, teachers are just ignoring them because of their skin color? Is that it?
By design. We know they can't build anything because their cognitive load will get too much by the time they get down the road, and they will actually collapse. And what that
Wait. Are you saying that based on their skin color, certain students just cannot handle the cognitive load because their teachers are avoiding teaching them foundational skills because of their skin color? Am I getting this right? Thank you, Andrew Joyner, for the questioning, curious, confused emoji. Appreciate it. I'm not quite sure what our speaker is saying right now, and that's not because the volume is low.
that also does is damage to their own self-esteem. Their own self-concept as learners gets diminished.
So let's split them up on the basis of race in order to bolster their self-esteem based on race? Okay, so the accusation here is that teachers are intentionally avoiding teaching Black and brown students the foundational skills that will assist them in further learning because they're Black and brown, or because Black and brown students inherently learn at a slower rate. I'm not quite sure what our speaker's trying to get at here, but it sounds very sketchy to me.
So this whole argument, which has no basis in research around low foundational skills being low level,
they are low. They are low level in the sense that they are basic. They are the lowest common denominator on which everything else builds. You've just described that. They're the tutorial. They're the basics. They're low level. Unless you've got some other definition for the phrase low level that I'm just not understanding. If you're equating low level with unimportant, well then, yeah, sure, I disagree with that. They're not unimportant. Is that what you mean? And I know I'm asking rhetorically, but I'm really trying to understand here.
has to be countered with the research. How do we build automaticity so that we can help students accelerate their own learning? And that is by making sure that students actually know how to process information more effectively. And so being able to do that is not a matter of a high or a low skill. Information processing ease is the path forward. So
this lady has absolutely no idea what she's talking about. She's saying words, but it doesn't mean anything. This is just sophistry. I mean, not to say that the question that she is being asked here makes a whole lot of sense in and of itself, but her response is nothing. If we were doing the bingo card, every square would just be word salad right now.
we really have to understand, how do you do that? Well, you have to chew on that content. That's what they call elaboration in cognitive neuroscience, meaning the old knowledge I have that I bring into the classroom with me, my funds of knowledge, have to be coupled with the new knowledge that the teacher's bringing to me through the curriculum.
That just happens as a matter of course, and just what? Are you talking about the teachers now, or are you talking about the students? How are the teachers going to impart upon the students the ability to comprehend new knowledge? So it's the teacher's responsibility to get the students to possess the ability to assimilate new information and match it up with the old information? I mean, I can teach you how to read. I can teach you how to write. I can teach you how to do math, but some things I don't have any control over as a teacher. So is it the teacher's responsibility, in order to achieve equitable educational outcomes, that they have to be able to make every student think exactly the same way and to the same level of quality. That's what I'm hearing when you start talking about neuroscience.
And in order for that inert information to turn into usable knowledge, it has to be mixed up.
What?
It's not a turn and talk. I literally have to take things apart, rub complex ideas together, talk about it, write about it, put it back together, take it apart. That is an arduous process for the brain. And
What? Yeah, no, this is an arduous process for my brain. I agree. This is a very arduous process for the brain. Because on one hand, I'm remembering this old episode of The Cosmos with Carl Sagan, where he explained how the brain works and how it synergizes information. And just sort of describing in sort of abstract terms how our minds work when it comes to assessing and taking in information, etc. That's what I'm thinking on the one hand. You know, something actually educational. And then I'm listening to this, and it's gobbledygook in relation to the question being asked and in relation to whatever she thinks that she's telling us. And what does this have to do with teachers? How? Okay. I know I always ask this, and I know I never get it, but give me an active example, all right? Everything that you're saying right now, give me the, we'll say, fourth grade teacher in an elementary school, has their students come in, and then has to, I don't know, do whatever it is you're describing being done here to the kids, or have the kids do that. How does that work? How does that work in the curriculum? Tell me.
in that pulling apart, putting together, talking about it, the brain grows dendrites. And when dendrites really, really grow, they start to fold in on themselves and they become neural pathways.
You may be entirely correct in that statement. What does that have to do with the style of teaching? That's just natural, physical, biological processes. What? I am honestly bewildered as to where we are, given where we started.
So the very thing that people keep talking about, right? Trying to bifurcate between low skills and high skills, just misses the whole point.
You have to have one for me to miss it.
Are students processing information actively?
Are students processing information actively? I don't know. How do you determine that when you are standing in front of your classroom? If that is the concern, tell me, how does the teacher assess that? I have to assume through testing or something.
And I can't reach the third floor if I don't have a foundation on.
So the foundation is a low-level skill then? Is it?
On the first floor.
This person teaches people. And let's say she doesn't. Let's say she just writes books now. The three people around her presumably teach kids, and they're not saying anything.
Yeah, and Zaretta, in my experience in conversations with folks, I think that low expectations, which certainly exist and have existed and will continue to exist, have been somehow colluded with foundational skills.
What?
So you can have both poor foundational skills and low expectations.
Yes.
And I think that those things have gotten confused in some places.
Low expectations to foundational skills. I mean, I guess it depends on the context. If you have let's say you're a fifth grade teacher and you have kids coming in from the fourth grade, you have the basic expectation, if you want to call low expectation, that they know how to read and do basic math because the teacher that came before you did their job, I guess.
and folks actually think it is an equity, that not having foundational skills is an equity priority, when in fact it's actually the low expectations that's the equity priority. And so
What?
how do we disentangle those two things potentially, so that kids are not deprived of the benefit of having those strong foundational skills?
What? Okay, again, maybe this is teacher speak or more expert language that I'm just ignorant of. I have no idea what's being talked about here. I'm sorry, guys. I wish I was a more educated commentator on this. I'm really trying to understand what they're saying in sort of layman's terms, but none of this makes any sense. And I would be very curious to know if any educator watching this blank could decipher this just reflexively.
I think one of the ways we disentangle is by understanding the role of active demandingness, because having high expectations by itself won't get them there. I'm going to go back to Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid.
You're going to go back to Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. Okay. And just as another note, in case, if you are currently in the chat, or anyone listening in the future, if you have any background in education, as a teacher, going through the certification, whatever, if this makes sense to you, or you can define these things more clearly than they are, please leave a comment in the comment section describing it. I appreciate it. And I'll, if it's substantive, I rate there enough, I'll pin it there for people to refer to it. Because I can't tell if this is all just high-minded nonsense, or if it's just completely going over my head because I'm a dum-dum.
Right? Not the one with Jaden Smith. Love you, Jaden. But that's not the one. We're looking at Daniel and Ralph Macchio. and like
Daniel was Ralph Macchio. Do you remember what Mr. Miyagi's actor's name was?
What did he do? He didn't just say, I believe in you and stand in a corner.
Yeah.
He actually coached him to build his capacity. And this is the disconnect.
Do teachers just stand in a corner and cheer kids on? I mean, I can imagine maybe some teachers do effectively, but what? Yes, and some ammunition. Pat Morita. Yes, very good. Who was also on Happy Days before that, but okay, so teachers need to be Mr. Miyagi. Sensei. Okay.
And so we talk about this idea of not just having high expectations, but also offering active demandingness, the process of, like a good coach, bringing that student so there's cognitive stretch, not so much that they're frustrated, not so little that they could do it and the brain just says, I could do this with my eyes closed. That you have to actually have it. And I think because teachers don't know how to do that, this is the progressive path toward low skills means low expectations. And if we just give them high skills, look, I'm giving them high skills. But here's what's insidious about that. The minute kids can't reach that high level, that high bar, because you've given them no path toward that, in the sense of, not over scaffolding, but they can get up there through their own effort, then we make up a story as to why those kids aren't doing it.
I wonder what our speaker would think about the recent initiative, or at least law passed in Oregon, that takes away the requirements or the prerequisites for students for graduation of high school, reading, writing, and so on. Or the initiatives around mathematics lately that say that, holding students to achieving the correct answers in math is inherently racist or classist or whatever. I wonder if our speaker would be for bolstering expectations, bolstering achievement marks, and holding students to those kind of prerequisites for advancement. Would she be for that or against it? Because it sounds like she's for it. because I hear the phrase holding XYZ accountable a lot lately. So holding students accountable while also teaching them the foundational skills. I agree. You put a kid through a training course, you have to see if they're getting the information and then test them and then not soft walk it if they don't. Because the idea is that, and because not every kid learns the same or at the same pace or in the same way. So if that's what she's talking about, and I know I'm being generous here, then I tacitly agree.
Meaning I'm giving them, I have high expectations. I'm giving them rigorous work. This is why my framework is actually called Ready for Rigor.
What?
Because the cognitive neuroscience is clear. You can't just throw heavy stuff at kids.
Isn't cognitive neuroscience just this side of crystals and, mood rings? I'm not trying to, not intentionally trying to condescend anybody who actually is a neuroscientist and everything, but when I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of people describe themselves as neuroscientists, and I always get a little skeptical because I've seen a lot of people describe themselves as neuroscientists and they end up being just new age quantum entanglement sort of gurus. So should all elementary school teachers also be experts in cognitive neuroscience as well? Is that what she's saying? Is that a necessary element to be an effective teacher? I don't know, because what are we talking about? Are we talking about how to make teachers better teachers or what?
You cannot get them ready for that. And let's go to the strength training analogy. A personal trainer,
What?
you come in to get fit and well, and they don't just hand you a 50-pound weight.
Could you quit with the analogies and just talk about active examples in the classroom? Go away from Mr. Miyagi and Gold's Gym and talk about what a teacher should do. How does it actually work on the ground? I mean, again, I'm not an educator, but if I was watching this for some kind of tips or advice or insight, I think I would be just about as lost as layman scribe is.
They said, if this is your goal, we're going to start with a 5, and then I'm going to give you a 10. It's going to feel a little heavy, but your muscles are going to grow and acclimate in response to that challenge. And what teachers don't know is how to give that challenge. High expectations, me holding that in my mind, me telling you that is not the same as my ability to coach you to stretch your cognition.
I think it's called testing, isn't it? Standardized or otherwise. It's testing. It's teaching the kids stuff, having them do homework assignments, repetition, practice, and so on, and then testing to see how much of that stuck. That sounds like the basics of how school works. Is she talking about something different? Is she advising a different kind of strategy? And if so, what?
So we just need to get better anchored in the science of learning.
What?
So that we are able to do that.
Tell me how the current procedure is lacking. Tell me how the hallmarks of basic public education is broken in this regard. How is your generic basic public education teacher holding kids accountable for what they are being taught today? And then tell me how they should be taught to be better at it. If you do not describe or articulate the problem, then nothing you say as a solution makes any sense. Jenna P., thanks so much. No Name has a question for you. Okay, well, one moment. Andrew Joyner, thank you so much for the drooling emoji. All right. No Name has a question for me. Okay, No Name has a question. No Name. Okay, No Name, you're going to have to post your question again because I'm scrolling up, but I don't see what it is. What am I looking for? Yeah, you're gonna have to tell me what your question is. Somebody telling me that you've got a question doesn't help me, I'm afraid. Yeah, and I've seen this so many times in so many other presentations. Just high-minded talk, lots of words, without actually getting down to the nitty-gritty. What is the problem? The problem is this. I have a solution, or I have a new strategy. Instead of doing this, you should try doing this. That makes more sense. So all I saw was email. Yeah, no name. I need you to put the question into the chat, because if you put it up there earlier, I missed it. Apologize. I'll wait another second or two, but I want to continue with this because I don't want to leave anything on the ground here. And I do appreciate, I appreciate the generosity in alerting me to this, guys, but no name is typing a question. Okay. Well, then I will give it another second or three here. I could always do it at the end of the. Okay, well, I will keep an eye out for no names comment. I'm going to continue with the video.
So we are just so grateful for the time that you spent with us today.
What?
A master class in understanding the connections between culture and the brain.
What?
And
did I jump ahead? Did I jump ahead? Did I click something? Okay. No name. Scribe, I work in schools. I understand what she is saying. She isn't proposing solutions. She is saying that students need steps towards high-level skills from low-level skills. Okay. Well, sure. Intermediary progression from one level to the next makes sense. How is that different from, again, maybe it's just the stereotype I have in my mind of my own education, of grades? You know, grade 1 English or spelling, grade 2 spelling, grade 3 spelling. I mean, that's a whole idea about grades. Is there something inherently broken about the grading system, not A, B, C, etc., but the actual like advancement from one grade to the next that's broken? Is that what she's saying? And if so, again, and I'm not asking you, I'm asking, the speaker rhetorically, what would you change about it? Maybe this is a talk for educators more than anything else, but at the same time, some basic language would be appreciated. But did we just get to the end of this thing? Because it still has like 2 or 3 minutes left on it. Did it just suddenly jump to a thank? It did. It just jumped to a thank you. Okay.
Better anchored in the science of learning so that we are able to do that.
So we are just so grateful for the time that you spent with us today.
I assume this was not a live broadcast because this is obviously edited.
A master class in understanding the connections between culture and the brain.
No, none of that. If that was there, you cut it out. I didn't understand anything.
And expectations and the ways in which we are harming our own selves within the education sector by asking the wrong questions or focusing on the wrong things.
No.
And so just really want to appreciate your time.
You didn't do that.
So,
Whoa.
At Pivot and Core, we bring over 20 years of experience driving continuous improvement.
Well, you could have fooled me because in 14 minutes, you talked a lot of stuff and said nothing. I mean, I was able to pull out 1 or 2 salient ideas out of that. And yeah, sure, I'm not an educator. I don't have a teaching degree or anything else, but I have a certain level of comprehension, oral and written. And most of that didn't make any sense, didn't actually address the questions being asked, was mostly analogies that told us nothing, non-articulation of a problem, and solutions being offered in the abstract that said nothing about what actually would happen in a classroom. If this is emblematic of what I can expect if I were a teacher from Pivot Learning and Core, I'd say this is a very bad showing for any kind of product endorsement.
And really helping schools and districts to think about how to design and implement solutions to these challenges.
No, if this is even a preview of how you would design a solution to a challenge, you lost me.
In achieving educational justice and
Educational justice. Okay.
really that focus work of improving teaching and learning. So we hope that you'll take this time to learn a little bit more about us.
I have absolutely no interest in learning any more about you. This was an edited presentation. So what you wanted someone coming to this video to see, I have just seen. And this demonstrates nothing but nothing. Definitions were not provided. A problem was not articulated in any real way. And the solutions being offered were abstract and amorphous at best. And like I say, the 2 or 3 things that either I or my audience could pull out of that sounded at least a reasonable notion didn't have anything to anchor themselves to because you didn't say anything. I really do look for things to try to learn something I don't understand, even if I don't agree with it. So when I saw a video that's going to tell me how racial literacy is important towards achieving an equitable education, okay, and none of that was here. I'll admit my abstract understanding of what the term racial literacy meant, given what I'd seen in different contexts, didn't seem to apply here. But at the same time, they brought up racial affinity groups and never really talked about them. Why? Am I just cursed to be looking for information from people and end up with just absolute nothing burgers? You know, I want a guy to teach me how to unleash my inner superhero. Nope. I want to learn, or at least be informed as to what someone thinks when they say racial literacy leads to equitable outcomes. Nope. And probably the most disappointing thing is I'm embarrassed, you know, because ostensibly I'm also hoping that you guys listening to this now and in the future gain something from this, even if it's knowledge that you inherently, again, don't agree with or find problems with. At least you understand something. I don't know that I come away from this understanding anything, whether I agree with it or not. That's very frustrating. I'm going to try Mio Iori, because if I say it phonetically, it's Miat Iori or Mayat. Racial literacy is so you constantly think about small things and are susceptible for being complicit in wrong thing. I mean, maybe. I don't know. Like I say, our speaker was talking about actual just literacy programs, teaching kids to read. I don't have a problem with that. It's not what I thought I was coming into. Nobody, not me. I feels mostest dumberest for seeing this. I know. And I'm embarrassed. You know, for the sound quality that everybody had to like really, I guess, lean in to hear. I can hear it okay, but that's because I'm on the receiving end, I suppose. And secondly, for the absolute absence of content or any specificity. I guess the only thing I take away from this is that you had 4 individuals there, all educators, all involved in education, nodding and smiling along to what amounted to practically nothing. I mean, not even answering the questions being asked, using a bunch of analogies that had no basis in use. Anyway, I wish I had something more to add, but there's nothing there. I sincerely apologize, guys. I'm not being facetious when I say I had expected something more out of this, and I didn't get it. And consequently, neither did you. So maybe I'll have to do a follow-up today with something else, something that I know will have some kind of entertainment to it. But with that, guys, I'm going to wrap this up here before I feel even more ashamed of myself. I do thank you all for joining me regardless. I appreciate your attendance and your generosity and your participation. I'll give it a second here if you guys have anything else you'd like to add. But in the meantime, I will at least advertise other things. If you'd like to hear more from me on more decidedly specific topics and Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the two of us tomorrow night, Monday night, on Satsu 2 Cents' channel for The Lords of the Night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where Satsu and I will go over the news of the day, news stories you send to us, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. And looking forward to next Thursday, where I'll be doing TED Excellence on this channel once again at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, although that time slot will be changing at the end of the month, so keep an eye out for that. Let's see. Bobby Lee Jordan, scribe, with people asking about bingo, what would you say about a different game? Immediate thought being Chutes and Ladders, where every time they hit one of your subjects, you/chat rolls. Thoughts? If the chat had some kind of roll script on it, that'd be great. You see those in like MMOs and things, just like /roll, whatever, 1 to 100 or something. That'd be great. I don't know that I could add a widget or something to the presentation where I could roll for us as a display. So I'll think about it. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of things I want to add to this whole routine. Chris Lee Lansford, it's okay, Scribe. You can't be blamed for all their shortcomings. We still love you. Oh, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Let's see. Lexi Mad, Scribe Light. I got here late. We need to start over. I am using my hall pass. Also, we should have a Sunday bingo card. LOL. If I was doing a constant or consistent type of thing, like TEDx, it's a brand. It's very easy. Sunday streams kind of run the gamut depending on what I'm doing or what I'm interested in. So again, I will think about trying to come up with something interactive for you guys, because I know these are less find the treasure as TEDx's are. And let's see, one more. Thrashy. Pretty sure I've seen a chat bot on some channel before. I've never employed a chat bot. I know I've seen them on other YouTube streams. I will investigate. I know you can do them on Twitch relatively easily. I don't know about YouTube, but I will take a look. But everyone, again, whoops, crapshoot DOC, TCAP, seek tap data. I don't know what that means. I'll just leave it on the screen. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us, or joining me, I should say. Boy, my mind's in another show. I hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And at least today, keep an eye on my Twitter. I may do something else today to try to make up for this. We'll see. Everyone, take care. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.